Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome California's Secretary of State, Alex Padilla.
Good afternoon, everybody. All right, just want to make sure we're all still alive, awake, and I am the newly elected California Secretary of State. I remind audiences, no, not the. I'll take that applause. I'll take that applause. I remind folks, no, not the John Kerry type of Secretary of State. But I do have some diplomacy skills, and I'd like to demonstrate to you what that is. Many of you know I'm from Los Angeles, and it's not my pleasure, but it is my responsibility to inform you all that the game is over and the Giants have prevailed 4-0 over my Dodgers. How is that? Prior to my election to Secretary of State, as most of you know, I served for 8 years in the State Senate. And for 6 of those 8 years, I served as chair of the State Senate Committee on Energy, Utilities, and Telecommunications. So for a former engineer, not a bad committee assignment. If only they would give me genomics and personalized medicine, I would have had a lot of fun. But it was under my watch. So we helped craft and shepherd a lot of important public policy through our committee and to both Governor Schwarzenegger and Brown, including but not limited to our renewable portfolio standard as we increase it from 20 to 33% in the state of California, the crafting of more than $1 billion investment in energy, not just conservation, but efficiency strategies, the deployment and adoption strategies for broadband to bring high-speed internet access to all Californians, and of course, the policy framework that embraces the new share economy in the state of California. And in all of our work, we try to be mindful of the very important security concerns, privacy concerns, not just consumer protections, but consumer choice objectives of our various policy proposals, and of course, the data-driven development of public policy and our economy. And far too often, I would hear from innovators and entrepreneurs, I just want government to stay out of our way, right? Because public policy done wrong can hurt innovation and can hurt the economy. Well, I'm an optimist, and I believe public policy done right can actually help stimulate the innovation and the growth of the economy. So while most people may look at the state capitol in Sacramento and say, oh, woe's me, there's the bill factory, I like to think that the California legislature is a little bit different and that it is an idea factory, right? What else can we do via public policy to help stimulate a new way in California? And I think the best example I have is this. In 2006, when I was running for the state senate, it was the year AB 32 was working its way through the legislature. And I would get asked left and right, where are you on AB 32? Are you for it or are you against it? And I had the audacity to say, well, AB 32, as landmark as it is, at the end of the day, all we're doing is setting goals. It's going to require a lot of engineers and scientists, a lot of innovators and investors to develop the ways of actually achieving those goals. And you can apply that same thinking to water efficiency in our current drought situation or any of our natural resources. It's no wonder that the vast majority of venture capital across the country is invested here, because this is where that innovation and that pioneering work is taking place. California, we are the Golden State. And how do we maintain the policy leadership when it comes to this kind of thinking and this kind of breaking ground? It's not just a conversation about zero-emission vehicles or autonomous vehicles, but how do we have zero-emission autonomous vehicles on the roads of California? It's not just a conversation about let's do more solar and wind, or what about energy storage as part of the equation? You need the two to work together to maximize our economic and environmental benefit. And something San Francisco can appreciate. Is it Uber or is it taxis? Leave it to San Francisco. There's an Uber taxi option, right? The third way can be a better way. But it's not easy work to take a leadership position. It's tougher work to maintain a leadership position, not just on the public policy, but on the holistic economic policy so that California maximizes the job creation and economic benefit of this policy leadership. And so now it's my pleasure to introduce one of the nationally recognized leaders on this very topic. An authority on clean energy policy, she realized her goal of making Michigan a hub of clean energy development in North America by developing entire supply chains for these economies. She built partnerships and created incentives for battery manufacturing, bioenergy, solar and wind power. She's now an adjunct professor of public policy at UC Berkeley and a senior research fellow at the Berkeley Energy and Climate Institute, where she recently launched the American Jobs Project. Please welcome to the stage former Governor and Attorney General of Michigan, Jennifer Granholm.
Thank you. I am privileged to be here. I know you're sort of looking at a gov sandwich, starting with Governor Brown and sort of clearing the end of the day with me and with Tony Early. I want to share with you some data from my laboratory, which was the Laboratory of Democracy, that is Michigan. And I want to share with you why I am obsessed about a couple of things. So with that, I'm obsessed about three problems. One of them is the loss of middle-class jobs. So this is the beautiful state of Michigan. How many of you been there? All right, good, good. More miles of shoreline than even California, believe it or not. All right, so loss of middle-class jobs because I was the governor during the meltdown in the auto industry. But when I started as governor in 2003, I served for 2 terms. So in 2003, we were just coming out of a national recession. And I've got a little flag there on a tiny city in Michigan called Greenville. And this is going to get back to you, but I want to share with you a story of failure to tell you why I'm so obsessed with this loss of middle-class jobs. So while I was governor, I get a call from the head of the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, which is the entity that works with businesses to keep them and save them in Michigan. And Greenville was having a problem, he said. Greenville's about to lose our hugest employer, which is a refrigerator factory operated by Electrolux. So I'm a new governor. This is my first year in office. And I said to him, well, how many people live in Greenville? And he says, 8,000 people. And I said, well, how many people are employed by the refrigerator factory? And he says, 3,000. So 3,000 people in an 8,000 person town. This is essentially a one-company town, right? And I'm the new governor, and I'm like, are you kidding me? Not on my watch. We're gonna go to Greenville. I'll bring my whole cabinet, and we will simply make Electrolux an offer they can't refuse to keep them to stay. Not like a Chris Christie offer, but tax incentives and stuff like that. So the problem is that Electrolux was contemplating going to Mexico. And so we went to Greenville, my whole cabinet, and the cabinet, we went and met in the city hall. The city hall was about the size of this table, basically. And in the city hall that day were all of the poobahs of Little Greenville, the mayor and the city council, the head of the Chamber of Commerce, all of that. So we basically all, emptied our pockets full of chips and put a pile of chips on the table and slid our pile of chips across the table to the management of Electrolux. And sort of in this pile of chips were things like 0 taxes for 20 years, and we would help to build them a new factory because it was really disintegrating. And the employees, represented by the UAW, said they were going to give an unprecedented amount of concessions to try to keep these jobs. Huge amount of incentives. So Electrolux takes our list of incentives, and they walk outside the room for 17 minutes. And they come back in, and they say, wow, this is the most generous any community has ever been in trying to keep jobs. But there's nothing you can do to compensate for the fact that we can pay $1.57 an hour in Juarez, Mexico. So we're going. And when this happened, this is a guy leaving on the last day. This is them imploding the factory. That was like a nuclear bomb in this little town. And in fact, this is what the factory in Mexico looks like. on the month that the last refrigerator came off the assembly line in Little Greenville, the employees had a gathering that they called the Last Supper. It was at this big pavilion, Clackles Orchard Pavilion in Greenville. And I went to it, and I wasn't invited because I had failed to keep this factory in Little Greenville. But I went because it was a community grieving, and I wanted to grieve with them because I was grieving. What did this mean? So I go into this big event with all of these thousands of people from Greenville. They're sitting around, 8 top tables, eating out of box lunches. And there was a sad band playing, or a band playing sad music. Probably a sad band too, but anyway, I go up to the first table, and there's a guy stands up, and he has his 2 daughters next to him. And he's got his hair in a ponytail, he's got his tattoos, his tiger's cap on. And he says to me, "Governor, I want you to meet my 2 girls." He said, "I am 48 years old, and I have worked in this factory for 30 years. I went from high school to factory. My father worked in this factory. My grandfather worked at this factory." And he pulls his girls in. He puts his hand on his chest like this, and he says to me, "So, Governor, tell me, who is ever going to hire me? Who is ever going to hire me?" And that question was asked by everybody in the room that day. And frankly, by every one of the people who've worked in the 62,000 factories across our country that have shut down between 2000 and 2013. I'm obsessed with how you create jobs in America in a global economy. Problem number 1. You talk about the hollowing out of the middle classes just quickly. These are the jobs that were lost during the recession. You see all those middle wage jobs. Those are all manufacturing. Much of them are tradable goods jobs, manufacturing jobs, right? The jobs gained during the recovery are all low wage jobs. So we got a structural problem, right? And can policy implemented well affect that issue? That's problem number 1. Okay, problem number 2, we all know about this, climate change. Problem number 2. Problem number 3 is Congress. So there is this very respected polling group called PPP that every year gets tired of testing Congress's lousy approval rating. And so they decided that they would compare Congress's approval rating to that of a number of unpleasant things. And so they found that Congress is, in fact, viewed worse than cockroaches, dog poop, lice, potholes, root canals, toenail fungus, heroin, the band Nickelback. You can imagine them sitting around the room going, "What is the worst thing you could possibly think of?" Donald Trump, hemorrhoids. Anyway, so the good news is that Congress is viewed better than meth labs, Charles Manson, and gonorrhea. And I know you're happy I didn't show you a picture of gonorrhea. So the question is, what can we do given these 3 problems? What can we do as a nation about those 3 things? Where are the opportunities to create middle-class jobs in America in a global economy? So climate change is this horrible thing. We know that. But there is an economic opportunity with all of these countries and all of these states now trying to find solutions. Of course, California leading the way. By 2030, 1 in 4 jobs globally, 37 million jobs are going to be in the clean energy sector. Where are those jobs going to be? What country will they be in? What state will they be in? Pew Charitable Trust every year does an assessment of where the money goes, the private sector dollars. And the last version of this, another version will come out later this month, but from 2013, $61 billion of private sector money in clean energy went in China, and the US was eclipsed by China a few years ago. We have $48 billion of money being invested in clean energy, and of course the dollar figures go up every year. Huge opportunity. Did anybody read the book Decision Points by George Bush, his biography? What? Nobody? Okay, all right. Well, I read it, and I want to share with you a quick story from it, because George Bush, he would talk about, it's really quite funny that you get, nobody's read it. He would ask leaders to break the ice. He would say to leaders, global leaders, hey, what keeps you up at night? And what kept George Bush up at night, of course, was the fear of terrorism. What Hu Jintao said when he was head of China was very interesting. He said, what keeps me up at night is creating 25 million jobs a year for my people. I want leaders who are kept up at night about how we create jobs for our people. You know, you can either be at the table, right? Or you can be on the menu. And I don't know about you, but I prefer to dine. So we've got to get in the game, because doing nothing is not, laissez-faire is not the solution for us. So I want to share with you what I'm doing, why I'm obsessed, because we are at Berkeley with 10 other states, 11 universities across the country are doing something called the American Jobs Project. The notion is, because Congress is not acting, every state has something to offer, all sorts of energy solutions. States right now have a very interesting strategy for economic development. So you remember when Rick Perry, of course, came to California to poach jobs. This is not unusual. There is a magazine called Site Selection Magazine, which awards a governor's cup every year to the governor who has poached the most jobs from another. We don't have the resources as governors to compete against China, but we compete against one another. We're just moving the chairs around on the deck of the Titanic. What a lousy national economic development strategy that is. But if you look at that, every state does have something to offer that they could be excellent at. Now you could think about having states specialize in areas that they could be really great at in the energy sector. So this project, I want to share with you some preliminary observations. And I'm going to go pretty quickly here because I know we are running out of time. But the first observation, the final project won't be done till August. So I'm just going to tease some observations that are general across the country, but obviously that have impact for California. Every year, Pew also does an assessment of the public's priorities. As you can see here, economy and jobs, of course, terrorism at the top of the list, but economy and jobs very high. At the bottom is global warming. This is true every year that they have been doing this. Global warming is not the word to use. In fact, we focus on jobs. That's why it's called the American Jobs Project. Observation number 2 is that energy solutions are going to be ubiquitous and invisible, effortless, thoughtless, Appleized, you name it. You won't have to do anything. We know this, right? Because you guys are in a state and in a region of a state that is so advanced with technology. The rest of the country is learning this as well. The Internet of Things, blending hardware and software in the energy realm is going to make this so much more seamless, where you don't even have to think about it when you walk in the room, the motion sensors, all of that, but it's going to go much deeper than that, effortless and thoughtless. Solar is going to be ubiquitous as well and invisible. So we're obviously seeing solar, organic solar being painted onto windows so that you can't even see it. Obviously, the solar rooftops, bendable solar, wearable solar, so that you could be able to wear it on your clothing. Wind, interestingly, this is a picture of a series of stackable wind turbines, but they're small. And so they could be in unusual places, higher wind places. They could be in urban environments. They could be fences. Wind will be everywhere. You're going to see that what does this mean for states across the country in terms of jobs? Well, we all know that the EPA has lobbed something called the Clean Power Plan, where they're asking states to reduce their energy footprint by 30%. And so a lot of states are filing suit against the EPA. And the question is, are you going to put on your green shades and see this? Think like a business person. Think like the people in your states who could be building the products that get you to this particular goal. It is a huge market signal. It's an economic opportunity, not a massive threat. So change this notion of being terrified about what the Clean Power Plan is going to do and make it into a moment of prosperity. This is what we are telling these states that we are looking at. Observation number 3 is that everything is going to be distributed, even manufacturing. So as we all know, it's so easy to build a wind turbine blade and to put it up, not. But there are small business opportunities even in the manufacture of that. So for example, this is one company that is building a wind turbine manufacturing opportunity where you roll in the manufacturer, which is this steel truck bed, which has the ability to make the turbines right there on site, install them on site, and then move them to the next place. Everything is going to be distributed and manufactured. 3D cars will be printed in the next year, apparently. This is the Detroit Auto Show. I'm not sure if it's that particular car that you want to buy, but eventually, you better believe that that will be part of what we are seeing. And so the ability to manufacture yourself biofuels or gasoline in your home is going to be another opportunity. This is a company that essentially has a version of a trash compactor where you put your garbage, your municipal solid waste in it, you press a button, and out comes fuel for your car. Cool, right? Turning your garbage into fuel for your car. What does this mean for states, of course, is that states that are quick to recognize that clean energy products are an opportunity are states that are going to win, and states that are slow are going to lose. And of course, California is the biggest example of this. More than 40,000 businesses in this clean energy space, 500,000 jobs. It's awesome. You know, although I'm now teaching at Berkeley, and a lot of this project is in partnership with the engineering school and School of Public Policy, Berkeley cannot go to Florida or to Michigan or to Ohio and say, this is what you should do. We have to partner with universities on the ground, which is awesome. But when people look at the California numbers, even if it's Berkeley saying it, they're like, maybe we should be adopting policy that allows our businesses to thrive. Observation number 4, of course, is that energy storage is going to be the mother lode, and batteries will be ubiquitous as well. Obviously Tesla, but then you've got, of course, this is my home team, the Chevy Bolt. It's the next version of the Volt. 30,000 is going to go the same distance as a Tesla. That was previewed this year at the auto show as well. I think this competition about who can produce the battery that goes the farthest is a really good thing for all consumers. Battery innovations, when you have them in combination, obviously Tesla has now purchased or was working with Solar City to have a combination of battery plus solar panels. You're going to see bendable batteries. In fact, in this next slide, some vehicle, OEM vehicle manufacturers are going to be putting batteries embedded in the car itself, which is another very cool idea. And so what does the battery thing mean for states, of course, is that batteries are going to be able to fit everywhere. They're going to make generation reliable. These are smaller batteries. Utility scale batteries are going to be huge. California is such a leader in this. And the question is, who's going to build the batteries? Which state will build the batteries? Are we going to allow this to happen here in the US, or are we going to allow our economic competitors elsewhere to do it? The 5th observation is that, believe it or not, you people who have never read George Bush's biography, conservatives and liberals can actually agree. If you use the right framing and the right language, there's an opportunity here. So freedom is a big deal, it turns out. Competition is a really big deal. That's awesome. Jobs is a really big deal. Choice, the ability to have consumers picking their means of putting solar panels on their house. National security is a big deal. Energy independence, pro-local business, all of these things we can all agree on, even streamlining bureaucracy. California, great example. Jerry Brown signing this new bureaucracy-busting measure to streamline solar permitting. A great example for the nation if people would follow what California are doing. Now, if you're skeptical about whether conservatives and liberals can agree, I just have to point out something that's happening in Florida. There's a Green Tea Party coalition, which is in these strange bedfellows, and this is too much text, but the point I want to make here is that pushing for solar choice is an unusual mix of business, conservative, environmental groups. They're doing a ballot proposal so that people can get solar panels on their roofs. Right now in Florida, you cannot have a third party own solar panels and lease the solar panels for your roof. So how insane is that in the Sunshine State that they cannot even lease solar panels on their roof, right? So the members of this coalition include the the thing I want to point out. All right, Sierra Club, Libertarian Party of Florida, Republican Liberty Caucus of Florida, Southern Alliance for Clean Energy, the Christian Coalition. These are unusual partners. But look what they're doing. They're getting a ballot petition going in Florida, and it's hugely popular if you test it out in the polls. So the sixth observation is that competitions totally work to get policy enacted. So let me just test you all, smarty pantses out here. What was the Obama administration's most effective public policy measure in terms of getting voluntary changes across the country? Don't say Obamacare, because that wasn't voluntary. What do you think got states to act? Race to the top. Smarty pants. Race to the top for education. What happened? The president put $4.5 billion essentially on the table and said to these states, you can decide whether or not you want to compete to get it, but if you do enter the competition, you have to raise your high school standards so that everybody's essentially taking a college prep curriculum. 48 states competed. Essentially, you created national education policy from the bottom up. 48 states. What are the two that didn't? Texas and South Carolina. Texas and South Carolina didn't, but the rest of them competed. So, thinking about that, now Congress today may not be able to do something like that because they can't imagine putting any money on the table for almost anything. But if not Congress, if you wanted to challenge the governors to do something, who could do it? Who would be great to challenge governors to actually get something done? Let's think about it. Let's think about this competition stuff. It works totally. I'm just saying. Remember when Google did the challenge for laying high-speed fiber optic cable? Look at this. Over 1,100 cities competed. If you had a Google challenge to the governors to raise their renewable portfolio standards across the country, you would see all 50 governors jump in. I am telling you, respect the states. Empower the governors. And you could challenge them to create muscular state energy policy. You know who I'm talking about. Trigger the competitive juices of these governors. Elon Musk, Tim Cook, Larry Page, Mark Zuckerberg, I'm talking to you. You guys could come together, put $4 billion on the table. I mean, you make interest on this in a couple of hours with all this money you have offshore. Do any of you know any of these guys? Because I'm telling you, you could get this done. So the question for us is, we're going to go around Congress and we're going to create jobs and we're going to attack climate change. The private sector could lead the way on challenging these governors, and it would totally work. So who can get the political consensus? Who can make these two parties reach consensus? Who can create prosperous middle-class jobs? Who can save our planet from death and destruction? Is it Jerry Brown? Is it Sergey Brin? Is it our next president? Whoever she is. I had to do that. Or is it the person who's about to join me on stage? With that, this is my segue. Did you see? Of course, Tony and I go way back because when he was head of DTE for 17 years when I was during my governor and attorney general years in Michigan. And I actually even tried to get Tony Early to run for governor of Michigan when I left, but he said no, he had to come out here.
Well, that's because some things never change. You are such a hard act to follow. I never would have gone there. Actually, as Jennifer knows, the real reason, I seriously considered it. And then on one of those Sunday morning talk shows, my wife was quoted as saying, "Isn't America a great company? Even divorced men can win elections these days."
And note that he's very happily married still, and probably a wise choice, but nonetheless, he's a great leader, obviously, and would be a great leader in many realms. So it's great. I'm glad that you're out here. We landed at about the same time in 2011. So you're now taking on this massive, been taking on this massive opportunity, and you've seen it in 2 different states. And I'm sort of curious, Tony, if you had to wave your magic wand and say this in California would be the best next step policy, what would you say in the energy realm?
And I think California has a great base to build on because we already have a framework for pricing carbon to deal with greenhouse gases. We have the best energy efficiency programs in the country. We are a leader in renewable energy. We've got a mandate for 33%. The utilities in California will make that standing on their heads. I mean, we're almost there now. We're at 28% at PG&E, and in fact, more than half of our generation fleet is totally non-emitting. So the next step actually has been taken. The governor just a week or so ago announced a target to reduce greenhouse gases 40% below 1990 levels. And it's an aggressive target, but it looks at the right thing. It's not picking and choosing winners in technology because, you know, that's hit or miss. But it is saying we got to get greenhouse gases down. And he's going to let the sectors decide which technology you want to use. Do you want to use renewables? Do you want to use electric vehicles? So I think California is well on their way. Now, what we have to avoid is all the individual interests who will want to take that 40%, well, it all ought to be in renewables, or all ought to be energy efficiency, or all electric vehicles. We've got to let each sector, whether it's our own or the Chevrons, figure out how to get there given their economy and how they operate their company.
So I'm curious, I mean, Tony's a pretty revolutionary energy company executive, and there's not every investor-owned utility across the country is as forward-thinking, we'll say. Why? Because it has not, the sky has not fallen with all of these energy mechanisms that have been put into place policy-wise. Why has it been so hard to get, for example, IOUs in the Southeast to to be less resistant, I'll say, to clean energy?
Yeah, I think you're starting to see that change, and part of it is because of the success that we've had here in California. You know, Governor, when you were in office and you signed the 10% mandate for renewables
I'm embarrassed
in
to say it in front of this crowd. I mean, 10% in Michigan was a huge deal. Tony was in the legislature, you know, knocking heads to say that we could do this at DTE.
And you remember the fight that we had to get that through. Well, I was just back there in December, and I spoke at the Detroit Economic Club, and Jerry Anderson, who's my successor, I mean, they'll make the 10%, and they're now talking about how do they go beyond that, because they've seen what we do here in California, that we've figured out how to manage the system. Companies, Southern Company, which I think in the industry is known as one that has resisted some of these changes, they have actually decided to get into the renewables business, and they're buying up projects here in California. So I think that's where California can be a leader. Our success, because we always have been innovative, our success can help convince others. You can manage this, as long as you've got to have some flexibility. You can't do it overnight, but people are seeing it can be done.
So if you had to then say what you would like to see happen on the federal level, what would it be?
Well,
I mean,
I loved your slide about Congress, because getting things done at the federal level is just next to impossible. But I think there are some things. Certainly, the federal government regulates electric transmission lines, and of course, in order to build more large-scale solar projects, particularly here in California, you need more transmission, so you need their cooperation. I think it's going to really be up to the states, and states have to be innovative, and states have to partner together. And the governor talked about it this morning when he said he wants to try and get...
Oh, you mean the other governor?
Oh, the other governor.
Sorry.
I get my governors mixed up.
The real governor.
That the Western region ought to start to work together better. And if we're successful, then you can go to other parts of the company.
And as you know, I mean, the biggest issue in all of this is cost, right? I mean, if you want to upgrade your grid, if you want to have even microgrids, et cetera, the question is who's going to pay for that? And that's the most difficult thing to persuade. On the federal level, do you think that there could be persuadable case that grid investments could be put into an infrastructure bank that includes traditional infrastructure investment, so that the definition of infrastructure is broadened?
You know, it would be nice, and I'd love to say yes, but again, getting back to the gridlock there, you might be able to get some financing. You know, we did have, after the economic downturn, there was funding for investment in infrastructure. So many states took advantage of that to put in smart meters. Of course, we're the one state that, at least PG&E, has almost 100% coverage on smart meters, and they have been an absolute incredible addition to our system. I think the real issue is to invest and upgrade to make this a grid of the 21st century to accommodate all of these technologies. And let me tell you what I mean by grid of the 21st century. So you can liken it to the internet. When the internet was first built, you put energy, it was college professors trading data back and forth, pretty simple. Well, today, as you heard, I mean, you can do anything on the internet and hook up anything to it. Well, the same was with the electric system. You put energy in one end, you took it out the other. Any good electrical engineer could figure out what the flows and the voltages were. Well, now you've got energy coming in all directions. You got solar, you've got wind. Sometimes the wind is blowing, sometimes it isn't, so you have to be able to monitor closely. Now we've got 160,000 rooftop solar units. We're the leading state on rooftop solar units. You need a much more sophisticated grid, so we need to invest in the infrastructure to make it plug and play. So whatever device, whatever storage device comes along, we're able to manage that for anyone who wants to use it. So they have the freedom to choose what they want to do. And that's investment. In fact, the Bay Area Council just published a paper that was sponsored by the 21st Century Infrastructure Committee of the Bay Area Council that talks about this.
And so so that's obviously huge change, right? To do demand response and, all of that. How much would it cost to upgrade California's grid to be smart like that?
Well, the good news is we've been actually doing it over the last couple of years. The state invested in smart meters, and then what we discovered was, that data from smart meters is really useful. And the best example of that was the Napa earthquake back in August. And we had 80 or 90,000 customers out of service. I thought that would take days to get back. But smart meters now, we can, first of all, poll all the meters, so almost instantaneously we know what customers are out. And then we invested in the switching devices that used to have to be manually switched. You send a truck out there to manipulate the system. Now they're all connected to our computers, and we can then almost instantaneously, within 5 minutes, you can repair the grid as much as you can, and then you go out and send your trucks out there. We had all of our customers back, I think, in 26 hours, awesome. Which was unheard of. So we've started, but literally, I mean, our capital budgets are $5.5 billion a year, and we've got to invest that kind of money for the next decade in upgrading the system.
And so talk about, I mean, when you say the smart meters and the inverters, and I want to talk about batteries, I often think, okay, who's making all that stuff? Where are they being purchased from? Talk a little bit about batteries and whether California might have an opportunity to actually make the energy storage devices that are going to be required as a result of the energy storage mandate that now has been put in place?
Well, I think that's where California has an advantage. There is a mandate to test and install storage devices.
Only state, right? I think it's the only state in the country.
I think so.
Yeah.
That's right. There are little pilot projects here and there, but this is the only state with a broad mandate for battery storage. We actually have gotten bids in on the first round of bids. We'll be having multiple rounds of bids on this. Right now, we don't know what technology would work. We don't know whether it's battery storage in your house, whether it's battery storage on the pole in your neighborhood, is it at a substation, what works best. But I think given that development is here, there will be opportunities for California companies. A lot of the storage evolves around technology, and of course Tesla has made a big bet on battery storage. Now, unfortunately, they decided to build the plant in Nevada. It was like your Electrolux story. I had everything on the table to try and get them here in California. The governor did too, but they decided to go to Nevada. But I think there will be opportunities here.
Yeah, and so the notion of all this distributed solar poses a potential business problem for the utilities because once somebody has distributed solar and you are subsidizing that through net metering, then they are not necessarily paying for the grid, which everybody uses. Does there need to be a new business model or a new way of thinking about how we encourage the distributed assets?
Absolutely. You know, we're operating with a 20th century pricing and economic model and trying to make a 21st century grid. And we've started to make a change, but it's been very slow, and we have to accelerate it because the technology is moving faster than the regulatory process.
Is there anybody that does it well? Is there anybody that has adopted a regulatory process that you think works, that still encourages distributed generation?
Well, from the regulatory process speed standpoint, actually Michigan has a really nice process that moves the changes along a lot faster. And you know, you were responsible for that. You know, the governor, this governor went through. I mean, a terrible time economics. I mean, the country had a bad recession, but Michigan, it really bordered on depression. Yeah. And yet through that, she was able to manage through it by streamlining government. And the byproduct of that is now they have a very streamlined process for getting things approved. And I think you showed the governor cutting the red tape on getting approval for rooftop solars. The Bay Area Council has, one of its key issues over the years has been we've got to streamline the regulatory process, reduce the ability to stop projects, because all these projects require layers and layers of approval.
Right, right. So I know that we are out of time, but I just have to close by saying that Tony Early looks like Mr. Clean. He's really sneaky, because if you look at his tie today, it's really got the Old English D, very small, the Detroit Tigers on his tie.
I wanted to make Jennifer feel right at home.
It's very cool. Please give a warm thank you to our sponsors.